And New York Attorney General Letitia James was just indicted on 2 charges related to mortgage loan fraud. A grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia indicted her on 1 count of bank fraud and 1 count of false statements to a financial institution. According to the indictment, Letitia James bought a house in Norfolk, Virginia back in 2020 with a mortgage loan. Under the loan agreement, she has to occupy the property as a secondary residence and not rent it out to anyone. The indictment claims that James violated the agreement by using the house as an investment property, thereby renting it out to tenants. The Justice Department says James obtained a more favorable mortgage worth $18,000 less by misrepresenting the use of the property. In a statement, the Justice Department says, quote, "The facts and the law in this case are clear and that they will continue following them to ensure that justice is served." If convicted, the New York Attorney General faces up to 60 years in prison and fines of up to $2 million. She responded to the indictment, calling it a, quote, "desperate weaponization of our justice system." She also denied the charges and vowed to fight them in court. Letitia James's first court date is set for October 24th. We'll be breaking it all down with former federal prosecutor Jim Trusty later on in the show. Stay tuned for that. In the meantime, President Trump is projecting optimism that Hamas will disarm as the peace deal continues to unfold. Both Democrats and Republicans optimistic and crediting President Trump for his efforts. Joining us now live is NTD's White House correspondent Iris Tao. Good evening, Iris. You've been at the White House all day. What are you hearing, and what is the latest that you're hearing about this historic peace deal?
Good evening to you as well, Steve. So we have seen some historic breakthroughs in the past 24 hours. Now, both Israel and Hamas have officially agreed to phase 1 of President Trump's 20-point peace plan. And President Trump earlier today saying that all the remaining hostages in Gaza will be released next Monday or Tuesday, and that he himself will travel to the Middle East, likely including a stop in Egypt for an official signing to mark the moment. Watch.
The war in Gaza, and really on a much bigger basis created peace, and I think it's going to be a lasting peace, hopefully an everlasting peace. Peace in the Middle East. We secured the release of all of the remaining hostages, and they should be released on Monday or Tuesday. That'll be a day of joy.
And Steve, on what's next down the road, President Trump today projecting optimism, saying that beyond phase 1, he believes that Hamas will disarm and that Israel will pull back further inside Gaza. And a senior U.S. official telling us tonight that the U.S. will send around 200 troops on the ground to monitor the plan's implementation. While a location remains to be determined, they say that no U.S. troops will be going directly into Gaza.
Iris, if you could, tell us about President Trump's team, what they're telling you as to how they secured this really unprecedented deal.
Sure. So some senior U.S. officials told us more details about some behind-the-scenes developments tonight. For example, they said a main turning point in the whole process was when they detected a shift from Hamas, that they're starting to see hostages as more a liability rather than an asset, and that's when it really started pushing for the hostage release. And another key turning point was when President Trump just last month met with a lot of regional leaders at the United Nations General Assembly and further took in feedback on his draft of the plan. Of course, last week we saw him announcing the 20-point peace plan together with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu right here at the White House. And just yesterday, officials said that they got some very, very serious breakthroughs and settled down on some consequential things that both sides were discussing, and that they were able to clear up some misunderstandings and miscommunications. Of course, yesterday, we saw a formal announcement of the deal. Of course, throughout this whole process, officials told us that President Trump was very personally and directly involved by including, for example, staying very accessible to both Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, who are now on the ground in Israel, taking their calls any time of the day. But also President Trump, they said, would take calls and chime in on calls, including with mediators himself, very spontaneously. And of course, today we've heard the Secretary of State crediting President Trump's personal relationships with the regional leaders as well, all leading up to today's breakthroughs. Steve.
Yeah, in the cabinet meeting, we did hear Secretary Rubio say how important that Middle East trip was and those face-to-face interactions, as well as at the UN, as you mentioned, Iris, meeting with leaders of the Muslim countries of Indonesia and even Pakistan. Before we let you go, what were some of the reactions that you heard from the deal?
So today at the White House, President Trump actually also welcomed Finnish president to visit, who sat down with him and started with praising him for the historic deal, saying that this is diplomacy at its best. Watch.
I went through the 20 points. It's almost like the best of record. You really see all the key elements. This is what diplomacy is at its best, and I think it's a potentially huge deal.
And Steve, we're also seeing a rare moment of almost bipartisanship, actually, on this topic, while both Republican and Democratic senators and lawmakers are praising President Trump's peacemaking efforts. Here are some Democratic senators talking about it today. Watch.
I applaud President Trump and the team and all for getting to this step. The release of the hostages is such good news.
We are on the precipice of a monumental and historic achievement, and President Trump deserves a measure of credit for it. So do others.
And of course, Steve, as you know as well, the Nobel Peace Prize will be announced tomorrow. And President Trump today, again, touting that he's settled 7 now major world conflicts or wars. And of course, now he's calling this number 8 potentially, but he's saying that he doesn't know if he's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize, adding that quote, "I didn't do it for that." Steve.
A relatively rare glimpse and refreshing glimpse of bipartisanship amidst a very partisan, ongoing government shutdown. NTD's Iris Tal live at the White House. Thank you so much, Iris. And Israel's cabinet has just formally approved the peace agreement. Meantime, Israeli families of hostages and Palestinian families in Gaza alike celebrating that peace deal. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
The girlfriend of a hostage held in the Gaza Strip started the celebrations in Tel Aviv after hearing the news that all hostages would soon be released. And the mother of the same hostage thanked God for the good news they received on Wednesday night. The first phase of the deal, which Israel and Hamas agreed to, calls for the fighting to stop and includes the release of all remaining hostages, the living and the deceased, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Other family members of hostages thanked President Trump, who was on speakerphone.
Thank you so much. Blessed be the peacemakers. God bless you, Mr. President. God bless America.
Thank you very much. You just take care of yourselves. The hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
However, Trump later said Monday or Tuesday as things continue to unfold. Still, the celebrations continued at what has become known as Hostages Square.
It's a holiday here. That's what we wanted for such a long time. Carmel, my cousin, was murdered in captivity. She's not going to come back. It's too late for her, but it's not too late for 48 hostages who are going to come back. 20 of them are going to come back alive. And this is such a happy moment for us, the families of the hostages. Such a happy moment for all Israelis and for all the Middle East.
And on the same day, residents in the Gaza Strip were seen celebrating the pause in fighting, as well as emergency personnel who have seen the tragedies of war firsthand.
Honestly, these are indescribable feelings. We can't believe it. But thank God the war has ended and we are alive. Honestly, we hope the war does not come back and for this to be really the end, with no death and destruction afterwards.
The first phase of the agreement also includes a partial withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip, and Israeli tanks were seen driving on the Gaza coast on Thursday. An Israeli government spokesperson said the ceasefire would go into force within 24 hours of government approval of the deal. After that 24-hour period, the hostages held in Gaza would be freed within 72 hours. Meanwhile, Turkey plans to take part in monitoring the ceasefire agreement on the ground in Gaza. An Israeli analyst said the biggest challenge for a lasting peace will be trying to get Hamas to lay down their weapons. That's something the terrorist group has not yet agreed to. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And as the world continues to laud the peace deal President Trump has secured between Israel and Hamas, many questions still remain about the plan's logistics, nuance, in the future of Gaza. Here to discuss these developments is retired U.S. Army Battalion Commander and national security expert and analyst, Lieutenant Colonel Darin Gaub. Colonel, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on social media that, quote, "This is a diplomatic success and a national and moral victory for the state of Israel." What reasons would you say Israel, besides the obvious, has to be hopeful for this deal?
Hey, thanks, Steve. Good evening. I think what they're calling success here is, of course, the fact that Hamas has agreed to as much as they have already, and of course, the number one objective being now getting these hostages safely back on Monday, and that by itself is significant. But as you alluded to, there's a view to the future with all of this, and so the success can be measured in more than the hostage return. Assuming right now that's successful, let's go with that. But what does Gaza turn into? Who monitors Gaza on the ground? What is its future for the people who live there, and for the nation of Israel, and for the greater Middle East? There's other successes too that Israel has had. It's not just about Hamas and the fact that most of Hamas has gone in the first place. They're largely ineffective. But it's Hezbollah. You haven't heard from them in quite some time, nor have you heard significant things out of the Houthis for a while either. And plus, I think Iran has also gotten the message clearly that if they continue to do this, that the very few friends that they have may not want to line up with them anymore either. So I think this leads to the potential for a much greater and broader peace throughout the Middle East. And we'll see how that works out, and hopefully it's longer lasting.
And what does that look like? You know, with the Abraham Accords, you had 4 countries that were signed on. What is a more broader pact, whether it's the Abraham Accords or just sort of a mutual understanding? What other countries are the major players in this that are seeming to get on board right now?
Well, first of all, there's Egypt, and they're critical, and they know that this is also critical to their own economy because they've lost so many billions of dollar equivalents due to the multiple issues with what's going on in Sinai. So that's one nation that's very interested. Another one, of course, would be Saudi Arabia, who was already on the precipice of being part of the Abraham Accords anyways. They have a type of animosity with Iran. This is the Sunni-Shia divide that might be something that can, it'll always be there, but it might be something that's can be overcome to a point to at least come to an accord where people aren't fighting. Even if they disagree, they can resolve differences in other ways. So those are 2 major nations, and if those 2 agree to it, then I would, in some form, then I would say other nations in the Middle East will see this as a positive way forward, and that Abraham Accords being the centerpiece could expand relatively quickly, even if it's slightly different terms for each nation.
As you mentioned, Egypt, obviously a critical player in this, both in the peace deal and the future, being one of the 2 entry points into Gaza, Israel being one and Egypt the other. This also going to be the point where the president is expected to travel to officially sign this peace deal, Egypt. So certainly a major country involved in this. On the flip side, why would you say Hamas has finally agreed to come to the table? And what is Gaza and, Palestinians in general going to get out of the deal?
Yeah, 2 great questions, different answers for both, and maybe a variety of answers. But the first thing I would say that Hamas is not only looking at the fact that the hostages are actually becoming something that's working against them because it's motivating Israel to keep this conflict going. And that turns into number 2, which is Hamas might be looking at this as self-preservation. There's not a whole lot of them left in the first place. And if Israel continues to push, as they have promised to do so, to eradicate Hamas, then ultimately what Hamas is going to say is, well, they're just going to keep coming after us and try to find all of us and kill all of us, and they've proven that they're going to. We have to come to an agreement now if we're going to think that we have any role in the future of Gaza or anything else. Not that they should, but I see this as them realizing that self-preservation is going to be a driving force for a little bit for them.
One of the next steps, obviously, is completely disarming any type of terrorist infrastructure and Hamas's capabilities inside of Gaza. We're just a couple of months out from the 12-day war with Iran bombing their nuclear sites. Obviously, it's well known that they have been a big funder of Hamas and Hezbollah and other terror groups. What is this process going to look like, and do you think that there is going to be a lot, I guess, shorter fuse, if you will, for Israel if Iran does indeed decide to insert themselves into this and start to fund Hamas yet again?
Yeah, if Iran goes back to its tried practices and keeps doing what they've always been doing for so many years, I don't think Israel has any tolerance for that, and they will step in very quickly and continue to do what they have to do to make sure that Hamas can't affect Israel's national security anymore. What could be different in that case, of course, is that a number of nations throughout the Middle East are also getting very tired of Iran being the one who's causing so much of these problems, and could potentially also step in and be part of the solution. As Iran is surrounded by a bunch of people who really don't get along with them as well as many people here in America might think. There's border issues with Afghanistan for one, and then part of Pakistan, and so there's plenty of problems for Iran to deal with. I just don't see any tolerance for on behalf of the nation of Israel, even us here in the United States, for Iran to continue to do what they've been doing for so long. That's going to be critical. Then you get to the Gaza Strip, who occupies it, who owns it, who fixes it and rebuilds it. I think that has to be led by Middle Eastern nations and not by us or Israel.
Retired Army Colonel Darin Gaub, greatly appreciate you joining us.